Joseph Fritzl. Joseph Fritzl was born on April 9, 1935, in Amstetten, Austria. He lived a simple life and became an engineer. He married a woman named Rosemary, and together they had 7 children. To everyone around them, they looked like a happy and normal family. But behind this image, Joseph Fritzl was hiding a very dark secret. In 1967, Fritzl broke into a woman's home and attacked her. He was sent to prison, but only served 1 year. Years later, his name came up in several suspicious cases, including the murder of a teenage girl. But there was never enough proof to charge him. The worst part of Fritzl's crimes began in 1984. His daughter, Elizabeth, had just turned 18. Fritzl had been building a hidden room in the basement of their home. One day he asked Elizabeth to help him carry a door downstairs. When she did, he made her pass out using a chemical-soaked cloth and locked her in the basement. She would stay there for the next 24 years. A month later, Fritzl gave the police a letter that he forced Elizabeth to write. In it, she said she had run away and didn't want to be found. Fritzl told police she had joined a cult. They believed him and stopped searching. In that hidden basement, Elizabeth lived in terrible conditions. There were no windows, and the air was damp and stale. Fritzl came down often, not to care for her, but to hurt her. Over time, Elizabeth gave birth to 7 children, all fathered by Fritzl. 3 of them stayed with her in the basement, never seeing daylight. The other 3 were brought upstairs by Fritzl and raised by Rosemary, who thought Elizabeth had left them on the doorstep. No one suspected anything because Austrian law had cleared Fritzl's past crimes from his record. Social workers thought he was just a kind man helping his daughter's children. Life in the basement was horrible. The space was tiny, dark, and moldy. There was a small kitchen, a bathroom, and some mattresses on the floor. Fritzl would punish Elizabeth and the children by turning off the lights or refusing to bring food. He warned them not to escape or touch the door, or he would gas or electrocute them. In 2008, one of Elizabeth's daughters, Kirsten, became very sick. Fritzl took her to the hospital, and the doctors immediately saw something was wrong because the girl looked pale and weak. Fritzl tried to lie again, but doctors called the police. Soon, Elizabeth was found, and she told them everything. The world was shocked. Fritzl was arrested and charged with many crimes, including abuse, false imprisonment, and murder. In 2009, he was found guilty and sent to prison for life. Elizabeth and her children were finally free, but starting a new life was not easy. The children who lived in the basement had never seen the outside world. Everything was new and strange to them. Andrea Yates was a mother of 5 living in Clear Lake, Texas. On June 20, 2001, her husband, Rusty Yates, left for work around 9 a.m. At home, Andrea filled the bathtub. In less than an hour, a tragedy happened that shocked everyone. When police arrived at the house, they found all 5 of her children dead. Their names were Noah, age 7, John, 5, Paul, 3, Luke, 2, and Mary, 6 months. Andrea had drowned them, one by one, in the bathtub. She placed 4 of them on a bed and wrapped them in sheets. Her oldest son, Noah, was left in the bathtub. After the killings, she called the police and her husband. Andrea Yates was the last person anyone expected to do something like this. She was born Andrea Kennedy in Texas in 1964. She came from a caring family and was a top student in school. She became a nurse and later married Rusty Yates, a NASA engineer. They got married in 1993 and wanted to have many children. Rusty followed strict Christian teachings from a man named Michael Waranecki. These teachings said women should be obedient and live simple lives. Andrea followed this too. After the birth of their 4th child, Andrea's mental health began to suffer. She had a history of eating disorders and depression. In 1999, she tried the unspeakable. She was hospitalized multiple times and put on strong medications, including an antipsychotic called Haldol. For a while, her condition got better when they moved into a proper house, but she had more breakdowns and other attempts. Doctors diagnosed her with postpartum psychosis and major depression. One doctor told Andrea and Rusty not to have more children, but they did not listen. Their 5th child, Mary, was born in 2000. Things got worse when Andrea's father died in 2001. She became more withdrawn, stopped eating, and had strange thoughts. She believed she was a bad mother and that Satan was inside their home. She even thought the TV was sending her messages. Andrea was once found staring blankly while holding her baby, and she was not able to care for her children properly. Still, Rusty began leaving her alone, thinking it would help her become more independent. Andrea told the police she did it because she believed her children were going to hell. She thought killing them while they were still young would save their souls and send them to heaven. She believed Satan had made them disobedient and that this was the only way to protect them. At her first trial in 2002, the jury found her guilty of murder and sentenced her to life in prison. But in 2005, the court overturned the decision because a doctor had given false information during the trial. Andrea was retried and found not guilty by reason of insanity in 2006. She was sent to a mental hospital in Texas, where she still lives today by choice. Each year, she's eligible for a review to decide if she can be released, but she keeps declining those hearings to stay in treatment. She lives in a private room, moves freely on a campus without armed guards or fences, and spends time in a craft room making items like greeting cards and aprons. Rusty and Andrea divorced in 2004. He later remarried and had another child, but still supports Andrea and believes she was very sick when the crime happened. Blanche Monnier. Blanche Monnier was born in 1849 in Poitiers, a city in western France. She came from a rich and noble family. People knew her for being very beautiful, and many men wanted to marry her. When Blanche was 25, she fell in love with an older lawyer. He didn't have much money, but she truly loved him and wanted to marry him. Her mother, Louise Monnier, did not approve of the relationship. She thought the man was not good enough for their wealthy and respected family. Blanche, however, refused to give him up. Angry and upset, Blanche's mother and brother came up with a cruel plan. They locked Blanche in a small dark room in the attic of their home. They hoped this would make her change her mind, but Blanche stayed loyal to the man she loved and refused to give in. After that, Blanche disappeared from public life. Many people thought she had run away or died. Her family even acted like they were sad and continued their lives as if nothing had happened. Over time, people forgot about her. The man she loved also died in 1885, and no one ever heard from Blanche again. Then in May 1901, something shocking happened. A letter was sent to the police. It said that a woman was being kept locked in a house for many years. The letter said she was dirty, sick, and living in horrible conditions. The police went to the Monnier house. They searched the attic and were shocked by what they found. Blanche was there, lying on a dirty, old straw bed. She didn't have any clothes, was very thin, and surrounded by bugs and rotten food. She had not seen sunlight in 25 years. She weighed only 25 kilograms. Blanche was quickly taken to the hospital. The story shocked everyone. No one could believe that such a thing happened in a rich and respected family. Her mother was arrested but died 15 days later from a heart attack. Her brother Marcel was also taken to court. He was first found guilty but later set free because at that time there was no law saying a person had to help someone in danger. Marcel tried to say that Blanche was mentally ill and that she didn't want to leave the room, but other people who knew the family said this was not true. They said Blanche had been forced to stay in the attic and had suffered a lot. Even after being rescued, Blanche never fully recovered. She had serious mental health problems for the rest of her life. She died in 1913 in a psychiatric hospital at the age of 64, far from the happy life she once dreamed of. Susan Smith. Susan always wanted a man's full attention. She married David and they had 2 little boys, a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. But Susan still felt empty. She began having affairs everywhere she went. She slept with her coworker Tom Finlay, Tom's own father, and even her former stepdad. One day, David walked in on Susan having a flirty call with Tom. Furious, he told Tom to stay away from his wife. Not long after, David filed for divorce. Heartbroken, Susan reached out to Tom again. He agreed to meet, but at a hot tub party, he kissed another woman. Jealous, Susan kissed a stranger at the same party. 2 days later, Tom sent her a letter. He said she wasn't acting like a proper woman, and most of all, I like you, but I don't want kids. Susan was devastated. She loved Tom more than anything. She stormed into his workplace crying and confessing every affair. Tom, shocked and repulsed, ended it for good. Susan, however, heard something different. Maybe they still had a chance if she proved she didn't have kids to hold him back. Susan made a cruel plan. She fed her boys pizza, strapped them into their car seats, and drove to a nearby lake. There she parked, set the car in neutral, and let it roll into the deep water. The car sank in 6 minutes, taking both boys with it. Susan ran to a stranger's house and begged to use the phone. She called 911 and cried, "My car was stolen with my babies inside." Police launched a massive search. TV cameras spread the story she made up of the missing carjacker, a black man who had forced Susan out of the car at a red light. For 9 days, Susan played the grieving mother on TV, begging for her children's safe return. But detectives spotted holes in her tale. The light she named could not have been red when she said, and she'd said no other cars were around. Under pressure, Susan took 2 lie detector tests that both suggested she was lying. Finally, she broke down and confessed she had killed her sons herself. Susan was arrested, tried, and found guilty of double murder. She was sentenced to life in prison. Even behind bars, she sought attention, twice in trouble for affairs with prison guards, and later linked romantically to other inmates and men on the outside. Dee Dee Blanchard. Dee Dee Blanchard and her daughter Gypsy Rose appeared to lead a heartbreaking life that drew sympathy and support from the public. Dee Dee painted herself as a devoted mother, tirelessly caring for Gypsy, who reportedly suffered from a slew of severe medical conditions, including leukemia, muscular dystrophy, and developmental issues. The pair's joint Facebook account frequently displayed updates about Gypsy's health, often accompanied by pleas for donations to support their medical expenses and daily needs. Strangers and local communities rallied around them, offering financial aid, free housing, and gifts. However, the story behind the facade was far more sinister. Unbeknownst to the world, Gypsy was the victim of Munchausen syndrome by proxy, a condition where a caregiver exaggerates or fabricates illnesses in another for attention or personal gain. Dee Dee had been subjecting Gypsy to unnecessary medical treatments, confining her to a wheelchair, and convincing her she was gravely ill. From childhood, Gypsy was conditioned to believe she was sick, relying entirely on her mother. Dee Dee isolated her, forbidding her from speaking to others and controlling every aspect of her life. As Gypsy grew older, she began to suspect that her illnesses were fabricated. In secret, she sought solace online, where she connected with Nicholas Godejohn, a man she met on a Christian dating site. Their relationship quickly grew intense, and they began discussing ways for Gypsy to escape her mother's grasp. The pair eventually conspired to murder Dee Dee, as the only way Gypsy believed she could achieve freedom. In June 2015, Nicholas traveled to the Blanchard home in Missouri. While Dee Dee slept, Nicholas fatally stabbed her, with Gypsy assisting in the aftermath. The two fled to Nicholas's home in Wisconsin. Hours later, Gypsy posted a chilling message on their shared Facebook account. This cryptic post alerted friends and neighbors, leading to a welfare check, where Dee Dee's body was discovered. Authorities quickly located and apprehended Gypsy and Nicholas. The shocking truth of Gypsy's life emerged during the investigation, revealing years of abuse and deceit by Dee Dee. It was discovered that Gypsy had no medical conditions and she had been forced to live a false life for over 2 decades. Gypsy was ultimately sentenced to 10 years in prison for her role in her mother's murder. Nicholas received a life sentence. Despite her incarceration, Gypsy has expressed feeling freer in prison than she ever did under Dee Dee's control. Lacey Spears. Lacey Elizabeth Spears was born on October 16, 1987, in Atwater, California. She lived with her parents, Terry and Tina, and had an older brother and sister. Her father worked in the Air Force, so the family moved around a lot. They lived in different states, including Alabama and Florida. From a young age, Lacey liked to play mom with her dolls. As a teenager, she began acting like she was sick to get attention. She told friends and people at church that she had diseases, even when she didn't. In her 20s, Lacey became active on social media. She would often post photos and updates about her life, especially about being a mother. In 2008, she gave birth to a baby boy named Garnet. The father of the child was unknown. Lacey told people that Garnet's dad had died, but that wasn't true. She even went as far as making up a man named Blake, using photos of a real man without his permission, and said he was Garnet's dad. Lacey was very focused on making Garnet look sick. When he was just a baby, she started telling people that he had many health problems. She said he needed a feeding tube and had trouble eating, even though doctors couldn't find anything wrong. Garnet had many visits to hospitals, and doctors were confused because his health problems didn't match any real condition. Lacey moved from Florida to Alabama and then to New York, always keeping Garnet close and claiming he needed medical care. She would often argue with doctors and change hospitals if they didn't believe Garnet was sick. She shared photos of him in the hospital on Facebook and wrote posts asking for prayers. She enjoyed the sympathy and attention she got from others. In reality, Lacey was making Garnet sick on purpose. She was using his feeding tube to give him dangerous amounts of salt. In January 2014, when Garnet was 5 years old, he became very sick. Doctors found that his sodium levels were extremely high, which caused his brain to swell. Garnet was rushed to the hospital but died a few days later. The doctors were shocked and couldn't figure out what had happened. The police started investigating. They looked through Lacey's home and found feeding bags with high levels of salt. They also found internet searches on her computer about how much salt could kill a child. Lacey was arrested and charged with murder. In court, it was clear that Lacey had Munchausen syndrome by proxy, a mental illness where a caregiver makes another person sick to get attention. She had caused Garnet's illness and death. In 2015, she was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to 20 years to life in prison. Lacey Spears had created a life full of lies. She used her own child to make herself look like a caring mother online, when in fact she was slowly hurting him. David and Louise Turpin. The Turpin family story is a very sad and shocking case. It involves 13 children who lived with their parents, David and Louise Turpin, in Paris, California. For many years, the children lived in horrible conditions. They weren't allowed to go to school, eat properly, or even live normal lives. But in 2018, one of the children, 17-year-old Jordan Turpin, managed to escape and called the police. Because of her, the other children were saved too. David Turpin was born in 1961 in West Virginia, and Louise was born in 1968. David loved science and wanted to become an engineer. He met Louise when she was 10 and started dating her when she turned 15. He took her out of school by pretending to be her father. They got married in 1985. David had a good job as an engineer. The couple followed a religion similar to Pentecostal Christianity, but they had strange ideas. They started having children in 1988 and ended up with 13 in total, 10 girls and 3 boys. At first, they sent their kids to school, but by 1998 they stopped and began homeschooling them. Over the years, things got worse. The children were kept in very dirty homes, starved, and sometimes tied to beds or locked in cages. Neighbors noticed strange things but didn't say anything. In 2010, the family moved to California. Then on January 14, 2018, Jordan escaped through a window. She had a phone that couldn't use the internet but could call 911. Her parents had been talking about moving to Oklahoma and tying up all the kids again, so Jordan knew she had to act fast. She showed pictures of her sisters in chains to the police. Thanks to her bravery, the police entered the house, arrested the parents, and rescued the kids. Later, David and Louise both admitted to their crimes and were sentenced to life in prison. They can ask for release after 25 years. Jordan and her sister Jennifer later spoke in a TV interview about their life. Because of the abuse, Jordan didn't know how to do simple things. She had never talked to a stranger or used a phone. When she ran away, she didn't know how to read an address or even spell her full name. Still, she did her best to tell the police everything. Jordan was very scared. She thought the police might take her back home and she could be killed. But she was more worried about her siblings. She wanted to save them. Their parents had told the children that the outside world was dangerous. They said if anyone found out about their life, The children would be taken away and things would be worse. The kids were told to lie if asked questions. David and Louise also used religion to scare them, saying they had the right to kill their own children if they wanted. The house was filthy and smelled awful. Louise would buy clothes and toys but not let the kids use them. The fridge had food, but only for the parents. Sometimes the kids went outside, but they wore matching clothes. All their names began with the letter J, like Jordan, Jennifer, and so on. It seemed the parents wanted everything to look perfect from the outside. Nobody really knows why David and Louise did these things. Louise was said to have a mental health problem, but that doesn't excuse the abuse. Some think the couple shared strange beliefs and fears, maybe even a shared mental illness. John List. In 1971, this man shot and killed his mother, wife, and children in their New Jersey home. Earlier in the year, he lost his job and was unable to provide the abundant lifestyle he and his family were accustomed to. This was an abject failure in his eyes. He hid the loss of his job from his family. He attempted to secure employment, but nothing measured up to his previous salary. So he remained unemployed and continued leaving his home as if he were going to work, while skimming his mother's account to cover the finances. Once that started to run dry, his only logical next step was to kill them. In his mind, going on welfare would have been too humiliating, so he instead opted to send their souls to heaven. He methodically murdered each family member one by one, moved their bodies to the same room, then cleaned each scene. He canceled deliveries, notified the children's teachers they were going on vacation, and cleared out what little was left in the bank. He even went so far as to cut himself out of family photos so as not to leave any account of himself behind. He spent one last night in the home and left the next morning, lights on and organ music blaring through the house's intercom system. Due to List's multiple ruses, as well as the family's reclusive nature, the bodies of the List family weren't discovered for a month. By then, List was long gone. He managed to evade authorities for 18 years. It wasn't until prosecutors commissioned an excellent forensic artist to produce a physical bust of List with age progression that he was caught. A neighbor of List recognized him and contacted authorities. He was living under an assumed identity in Colorado. He had gained employment as an accountant and was remarried. List was sentenced to 5 terms of life imprisonment. When asked why he didn't do the same to himself as well, he replied that it was a sin, and he wanted to be reunited with his family in heaven. He died in custody due to complications of pneumonia in 2008. The weird thing is, List's home was a mansion. The room the bodies were placed in was a ballroom. Directly above the bodies of his family in the ballroom was a Tiffany skylight worth $100,000 at the time of the killings. More than enough money to have recovered List and his family from financial ruin. Genie Wiley. Genie Wiley was a girl who lived a very sad life. Her story sounds like something from a sad fairy tale, but it really happened. There were no happy endings, no magic, and no one came to rescue her. Genie was born in 1957 in California. Her parents were named Clark and Irene. Her father had a very hard and angry life. He didn't like children. 2 of their children died young, and it was discovered later that they died because Clark left them in the garage during winter, and did all of this intentionally. Only Genie and her brother John survived. From the time Genie was very small, her father kept her in one room. He tied her to a potty chair or kept her in a crib that looked like a cage. He didn't let her talk, play, or see other people. If she made noise, he hit her with a big stick. He even growled at her like a wild dog to scare her. Her mother had poor eyesight and was too scared to stop him. Genie lived like this for more than 13 years. She was never taught to speak or how to act like other children. She couldn't eat properly, and she didn't grow like a normal child. Even though she was 13, she looked more like a small 8-year-old. In 1970, Genie's mother finally ran away from the house and took Genie with her. She went to a social services office by accident, thinking it helped people with bad eyesight. But when the workers saw Genie, they knew something was wrong. Genie couldn't walk properly. She kind of hopped like a bunny, and she didn't speak much at all. The police arrested her parents. Her father died before the trial and left a note saying, "The world will never understand." Doctors at the hospital were shocked when they met Genie. She only knew a few words and didn't act like other children her age. She became known as a feral child because she had grown up without human contact. Scientists wanted to study her to understand how children learn language. From 1971 to 1975, many people watched and tested her. At first, she didn't know how to talk, but tried very hard to learn. She was never able to learn full grammar, but she could think in smart ways like putting pictures in order or building things. Some of the scientists cared about her, but others may have been more interested in fame and research. Genie was moved between homes, including living with the scientists. One teacher, Jean Butler, even tried to adopt her, but some people believe she just wanted attention. Later, Genie lived with another researcher, David Rigler, and his family. She seemed happy there for a while. She liked to touch new things and explore, but in 1975, the money for her care ran out. Genie had to go back to live with her mother for a short time. Later, her mother took the scientists to court, saying they had used Genie for their own purposes. Genie was then placed in foster homes. Sadly, some of these homes were not kind. In one home, she was punished just for getting sick. She became scared and stopped speaking again. Over time, Genie disappeared from public view. Her mother died in 2003. Her brother and niece also passed away. A writer named Russ Reimer tried to find out what happened to her, but many people refused to talk. The last known news said Genie was living in a care home in Los Angeles. A woman named Susan Curtis, who once worked with her, tried for many years to see Genie again but was not allowed. Genie's story is very sad. She was hurt by her family, used by researchers, and forgotten by the system that should have helped her. Marybeth Tinning. Between 1967 and 1985, she gave birth to 9 children. All of them died. Marybeth was only convicted of killing 1 child, but many believe she caused the deaths of 8 of her 9 children. She was born Marybeth Rowe on September 11, 1942, in Duanesburg, New York. Her father went to war when she was a child, and her mother worked different jobs. Because of this, Marybeth stayed with different family members. One relative once said she was not wanted. Marybeth told her brother that their parents only wanted him, not her. She went to Duanesburg High School and did okay, and later worked various jobs. In 1963, she met Joe Tinning on a blind date. They got married in 1965. Joe was known to be quiet and friendly. Their first child, Barbara, was born in 1967. Their second, Joseph Jr., was born in 1970. In 1971, Marybeth's father died suddenly, and soon after that, their third child, Jennifer, was born. But Jennifer died just 8 days later. People believe she may have been the only child to die from natural causes. 17 days later, Joseph Jr. was rushed to the hospital with seizures. He was sent home but died a few hours later. His death was blamed on SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome. 6 weeks later, Barbara also died. Marybeth said she had seizures. Doctors said she died from brain swelling. People who went to the funerals noticed something strange. Marybeth acted more social than sad, like she wasn't really grieving. Over the next few years, Marybeth had more children: Timothy, Nathan, Mary Frances, Jonathan, and Tammy Lynn. Each of them died young. She often claimed they had seizures or stopped breathing. Doctors blamed things like SIDS or other health problems. They also adopted a boy named Michael. He was healthy and active, but in 1981 he too died suddenly. This raised questions because Michael wasn't Marybeth's biological child, so the idea that a genetic problem was causing the deaths didn't make sense anymore. By the time Tammy Lynn, her 9th child, died in 1985, people had had enough. Family, nurses, and neighbors began calling the police. Marybeth was questioned by police in 1986. At first, she denied everything, but later she admitted to killing 3 children: Timothy, Nathan, and Tammy Lynn. She said she smothered them with a pillow because she felt like a bad mother. She signed a statement admitting this. She said she killed Tammy Lynn because she wouldn't stop crying. Marybeth was arrested and charged with Tammy Lynn's murder. Later, she said the confession was false and that police told her what to say. Still, the court didn't believe her. After a long trial, she was found guilty. Many people wonder what Joe, her husband, thought through all of this. Some believe he always had a feeling something was wrong, but chose to ignore it. Marybeth has had many parole hearings over the years, but they've all been denied. Joe still supports her and continues to visit her in prison to this day. John and Sarah Makin. In the late 1800s, life was very hard for poor families in New South Wales, Australia. Many children were left without parents who could take care of them. Because of this, the government started a system called boarding out, where families were paid to care for these children instead of sending them to big institutions. By the 1890s, thousands of children were being looked after in homes under this system. In 1892, a young woman named Amber Murray gave birth to a baby boy named Horace. She was only 18 and not married, so she couldn't raise him. She placed an ad in the Sydney Morning Herald asking if someone could adopt her child. She promised to pay money every week to help with the child's care. John and Sarah Makin answered her ad. They said they would take care of the baby for 10 shillings a week. Their daughter Blanche picked up the baby from Amber. Amber kept her promise and sent money every week. But every time she asked to see her baby, the Makins gave excuses. One day, when Amber went to visit them, she found out they had moved. She never saw her baby again. Months later, on October 11, 1892, a worker named James Hannay was fixing a clogged drain behind a house in McDonaldtown, New South Wales. What he found shocked him. Inside the drain were 2 small bundles of clothing, and wrapped inside were the remains of 2 babies. The police were called, and a full search was launched. They found 5 more baby bodies buried in the garden. By looking at old rental records, police discovered that John and Sarah Makin had once lived in that house. The police then searched 11 homes the Makin had lived in since 1890. In many of them, they found more remains. The couple was finally found living in Chippendale, just a few kilometers away. More baby bodies were discovered there too. In total, police found the remains of 12 infants. John and Sarah Makin were arrested, along with several of their daughters, Florence, Clarice, Blanche, and Daisy. Amber Murray was called as the first witness at the trial and told her heartbreaking story. During the trial, another couple also came forward. They had given their baby to the Makins, along with money for care. Their baby had died just days later. They even paid the Makins for the funeral, which the Makins did not attend. Eventually, one of the Makin daughters, Clarice, testified against her parents. She recognized clothing on one of the dead babies and said it had belonged to her mother. It was believed that baby Horace was killed and buried during the family's time living in Redfern. The trial caused a huge public reaction. Crowds came to the courthouse, and newspapers covered every detail. In the end, John Makin was found guilty and sentenced to death. He was hanged in 1893. Sarah Makin was sentenced to life in prison with hard labor. She served almost 20 years and was released in 1911. She died in 1918, mostly forgotten. This sad case showed the dark side of baby farming, when people pretended to care for babies just to take the money, and often harmed or even killed them. Klara Mauerova. In May 2007, in the small town of Kuzim in the Czech Republic, a man named Edward set up a baby monitor to watch over his newborn baby. Instead of seeing his baby, the monitor showed a thin, sick-looking boy tied up, crawling on the floor and trying to eat food like an animal. Shocked and scared, Edward quickly called the police. When the police arrived, they found 2 young boys, Jacob and Andre, living in horrible conditions. Their mother, Klara Mauerova, was a single mother who had always seemed loving and caring. She lived in the house with her 2 sons and a girl named Annika. Everyone believed Annika was a 13-year-old girl from Norway who had no parents and had escaped from bad people. Klara's sister, Katrina, had brought Annika to them, and Klara agreed to take care of her. But things were not as they seemed. Klara and her sister Katrina were members of a strange religious group called the Grail Movement. This group believed they could do bad things as long as they were doing it for a higher purpose. Around this time, Klara began getting mysterious text messages from someone claiming to be a doctor. This so-called doctor told her that Annika was special and that her own sons had evil inside them. He said they needed to be punished to remove the badness. So Klara began beating and locking up her sons, especially Jacob. Later, in August 2006, the doctor told Klara that the punishments weren't enough and she should take the boys to a cottage in the woods. When they got there, other adults were waiting, including Katrina and people from their strange group. They locked the boys in cages meant for dogs. The boys were forced to eat off the ground and use the cages as toilets. They were also tortured in terrible ways, being scratched, forced to fight each other, held underwater, and also cannibalism was involved too. After the boys were taken back home, Klara continued to keep them locked in a dark cellar and watch them through cameras. Meanwhile, Annika lived upstairs like a normal child, in a room full of toys. Everything changed on May 10, 2007, when Edward's baby monitor picked up the video from Klara's camera. He saw Andre tied up and dirty and called the police. They came right away, broke into the house, and rescued the boys. Klara and Katrina were arrested. At first, Annika was taken to a children's home, but she soon ran away. Then came a shocking discovery. Annika was not a 13-year-old girl at all. She was actually a 33-year-old woman named Barbora Shkrylova. She had a rare health condition that made her look like a child and had tricked everyone, including Klara. After escaping the children's home, Barbora ran to Norway and pretended to be a 13-year-old boy named Adam. She even shaved her head and went to school there. With the help of a man named Martin, who lied to protect her, she fooled many people again. But in early 2008, she was caught and brought back to the Czech Republic. During the trial, Klara said she only hurt her sons because a doctor told her to. The police later discovered that the doctor was not real. The messages had been sent by Katrina, pretending to be someone else. Katrina also knew that Barbara was an adult the whole time, but didn't tell Klara. Barbara claimed she was also a victim, but many people didn't believe her. It was later found out that Barbara's real father was a leader in the Grail movement, and one of the men who helped torture the boys was her brother. In the end, Klara was sentenced to 9 years in prison. Katrina got 10 years. Barbara was given 5 years but was let out early and put on probation for another 5 years. The other adults who were involved got between 5 and 7 years in prison. As for Jacob and Andre, no one knows for sure what happened to them after that. Some say they were adopted by a family in the United States. Whatever the truth is, their lives were deeply changed by the terrible things that happened to them. Rosemary and Fred West. So this story is going to sound very vague, but you'll probably be able to fill in the details while I tell it. Fred West was born in 1941 in England and grew up on a farm with his parents and siblings. His childhood was far from normal, and these early experiences may have shaped the kind of person he became. Fred didn't enjoy school and left at age 15 to work on farms. At 17, he had a serious motorcycle accident that caused a head injury. This accident changed his behavior. Later, he had another bad fall and began having health problems that affected his mood and self-control. In his early 20s, Fred met a woman named Rena. She was already expecting a baby, but Fred accepted her situation and they got married. They moved to Scotland and had another child together. Fred worked as an ice cream truck driver, but something very tragic happened while he was working, which caused the family to move again. Soon, Rena left Fred, but he kept the children. A friend of Rena's named Anne started spending time with Fred and eventually went missing. Fred never reported her absence, which raised questions later. In 1968, Fred met a teenager named Rosemary Letts. Most people called her Rose. Even though she was very young, Fred quickly formed a close relationship with her. They began living together and had their first child in 1970. That same year, while Fred was briefly away, one of the children vanished. It's believed Rose may have been involved, but nothing was confirmed at the time. Fred and Rose married in 1972 and had several more children. To support the family, Rose started taking in visitors for extra money. Fred was aware and even involved in ways that would shock most people. Their home became a very troubling place, especially for the children and others who stayed there. They moved to 25 Cromwell Street, a house that would later become known for all the wrong reasons. At one point, they hired a young woman to help with the kids, but she was treated very badly and soon left. Sadly, she wasn't the only one. Over time, the couple's behavior became worse. One of their daughters, Heather, later disappeared. When asked where she was, the family would often make jokes, something that made people uneasy. In 1992, the police began to look more closely at the family. Fred was charged with serious crimes, and Rose was also investigated. Their children were taken into care for safety. There were whispers that something might be hidden in the garden of their home. In 1994, police searched the property and made a terrible discovery: remains buried under the home and in the garden. Fred admitted to being responsible and mentioned several names, including former partners and family members who had gone missing. He said Rose didn't know anything, but not everyone believed him. Fred was arrested, and in early 1995, passed away while in prison before his trial could begin. Rose later went to court and was found responsible for many of the same things. She is still serving a sentence and will never be released. In 1996, their home at 25 Cromwell Street was torn down, and today it's just a walkway. Stephen Pladl. Katie was born in 1998 to Elisa and Stephen Pladl, a young couple who had met online as teenagers. Due to difficult circumstances and a desire to give their baby a better life, Elisa and Stephen decided to place Katie for adoption shortly after her birth. Although this isn't as simple as it seems, according to Elisa, Stephen had temperament issues, and when Katie was just a little baby, Stephen was aggressive toward her and even hit and drowned her to the point where she was on the brink of losing consciousness. For whatever reason, after they put Katie up for adoption, she was quickly adopted and was welcomed into a loving home by her adoptive parents, Anthony and Kelly Fusco, in New York, where she grew up surrounded by care and opportunities. Katie's life as an adoptee was happy and stable. By the time she graduated from high school in 2016, she was a talented and ambitious young woman with dreams of studying digital advertising at college. However, like many adoptees, Katie felt a natural curiosity about her biological family. At 18, she decided to reach out to her birth parents, Elisa and Stephen, reconnecting with them through social media. After reconnecting, Katie expressed a desire to meet her birth family in person and learn more about her roots. She moved to Virginia to live with her biological parents and her two younger half-sisters. Initially, this seemed like a positive step, a chance for Katie to bridge the gap between her past and present. However, tensions within the family soon surfaced. Elisa, Katie's biological mother, decided to leave the household, citing difficulties in her marriage with Stephen, while Katie remained in the home. What began as a reunion meant to reconnect the family took an unfortunate turn. Over time, Katie and Stephen developed an unhealthy and inappropriate romantic relationship, which escalated to the point where they considered themselves a couple. This relationship caused immense strain on everyone involved, especially Elisa, who became deeply concerned. In July 2017, Stephen and Katie married in Maryland, despite their biological connection, which they kept hidden from the public. They even welcomed a child together, a son named Bennett, shortly after. When Elisa learned of the relationship, she contacted authorities reporting their situation. Following an investigation, both Stephen and Katie were charged and ordered to avoid contact with each other. Their marriage was annulled, and Katie moved back to New York to live with her adoptive parents, who supported her as she tried to rebuild her life. Stephen remained in North Carolina, and their son Bennett was placed in the care of Stephen's mother. Sadly, this story took a devastating turn. On April 11, 2018, Stephen fatally shot 7-month-old Bennett at his home in Knightdale, North Carolina, before driving to New York to track down Katie and her adoptive father, Anthony Fusco. As Katie and Anthony were driving together in New Milford, Connecticut, Stephen ambushed them at an intersection, shooting them both to death. He then fled the scene, driving to Dover, New York, where he died with a gunshot. This tragic sequence of events ended in the loss of 4 innocent lives. What began as a hopeful family reunion turned into one of the most disturbing family tragedies. Lisa Montgomery. This is the story of a terrible crime. It made one woman the only woman executed in America in over 70 years. The crime happened in a very small farming town called Skidmore, Missouri. Only about 250 people lived there. The victim was a woman named Bobby Jo Stinnett. She lived in Skidmore with her husband, Zeb. Bobby Jo was 8 months pregnant in December 2004. She was happy and expecting her baby soon. She also bred small dogs called rat terriers. She talked with other dog breeders online in a group called Ratter Chatter. In this online group, Bobby Jo shared her happy news about being pregnant. Another woman in the group, Lisa Montgomery, also said she was pregnant. But some people in the group didn't believe Lisa. They noticed she didn't look pregnant. Bobby Jo, however, trusted Lisa. They had met before at dog shows and often chatted about their pregnancies. In November 2004, a dog breeder named Jason Dawson got an email. It was from someone named Darlene Fisher, asking about puppies for Christmas. Jason knew Bobby Jo had puppies ready soon. He gave Darlene Bobby Jo's contact details. Bobby Jo and Darlene arranged to meet on December 16th so Darlene could see the puppies. Bobby Jo didn't know that Darlene Fisher was actually Lisa Montgomery using a fake name. That afternoon, while Zeb was at work, someone knocked on Bobby Jo's door. When Bobby Jo answered, it was Lisa Montgomery. Lisa forced her way inside. She attacked Bobby Jo, strangling her with a cord until she stopped moving. But Lisa wasn't there just to hurt Bobby Jo. She wanted Bobby Jo's baby. She used a kitchen knife to forcefully take her unborn child. Horrifyingly, Bobby Jo woke up while Lisa was doing this. She was too weak to fight back. Lisa pulled the baby out of Bobby Jo's body, wrapped the baby in a blanket, and left Bobby Jo to die. About an hour later, Bobby Jo's mother, Becky, went to the house and found Bobby Jo lying on the floor in a lot of blood, and there was no baby. Becky called for help immediately. Sadly, the paramedics couldn't save Bobby Jo. She was pronounced dead. The police realized the baby had been taken. They started searching right away. People in the dog breeder online group heard about the murder. A group member saw the messages between Bobby Jo and Darlene Fisher. She told the FBI. The FBI traced the fake emails back to Lisa Montgomery's home in Kansas. The next day, Lisa and her husband Kevin were at a cafe showing off a new baby girl. Lisa told everyone she had given birth the day before while shopping, but when they got home, FBI agents were waiting. Lisa told them her story, but the FBI checked with the place she said she gave birth. They had no record of her. Lisa quickly confessed to the crime. Kevin was shocked. He truly believed the baby was theirs. Lisa was arrested for murder and kidnapping. It turned out Lisa could not have been pregnant. She had surgery years before that made having more babies impossible. She had lied about being pregnant several times before. Her previous husband said she faked 5 pregnancies. Kevin said she faked 3 while with him. At her trial, Lisa pleaded not guilty. Her lawyer said she was mentally ill because of terrible things she suffered as a child and tried to avoid the death penalty. The jury didn't agree. After only a few hours, they found her guilty of murder. They also recommended the death penalty, and the judge agreed. More information about Lisa's awful childhood came out later. As a child, her mother let men hurt her. Her stepfather beat her badly and hurt her head. Her mother drank alcohol heavily while pregnant with Lisa. When Lisa was only 14, she became an alcoholic. At 17, her mother forced her to marry her stepbrother, who also abused her. She had 4 children with him, living in deep poverty. Much of this abuse information wasn't fully shared with the jury during her trial. Lisa stayed on death row for 14 years. Just before leaving office, President Trump allowed federal executions to start again. Lisa Montgomery was executed by lethal injection on January 13, 2021. Bobby Jo's baby miraculously survived. Her name is Victoria Jo. She is now a teenager and lives with her father, Zeb. Their old house in Skidmore remains empty. Megan Huntsman. Megan Huntsman is a woman from Utah who did something very terrible. Over 10 years, she secretly gave birth to 7 babies and killed 6 of them right after they were born. One of the babies was stillborn, meaning it was already dead before birth. She hid their bodies in boxes in her garage. Megan lived with her husband, Darren West, and their 3 daughters in a small town in Utah. Both Megan and Darren used drugs and drank too much. In 2006, Darren went to prison for drug charges. His parents owned the house they lived in. They let Megan and the kids stay there, but only if Megan stayed loyal to Darren. When Darren's parents found out Megan had a new boyfriend, they made her move out. She and her daughters went to live with her mom and later with her boyfriend. Her drug use got worse during this time. In April 2014, Darren was released from prison after 8 years. He returned to the house to collect his old things. While looking through boxes in the garage, he found something horrible: a dead baby. He called the police right away. When police came, they searched the garage and found 6 more dead babies. Each one was wrapped in cloth, placed in plastic, and hidden inside a box. The boxes were stacked neatly against the wall. Megan was arrested right away. She was 39 years old at the time. Darren was also questioned. He said he never knew Megan was pregnant. Later tests showed he was the father of all the babies. Megan had the babies between 1996 and 2006. In court, Megan told the judge she was guilty. She even said she had lost track of how many babies she had. The police said Megan's drug use played a big role. She told them she chose drugs over her babies. Darren later admitted he sometimes knew Megan was pregnant, but she always said she had a miscarriage. He was also using drugs and often didn't know what was really going on. From 2011 to 2014, Megan lived somewhere else. People wonder if there could be more babies hidden in other places. Her boyfriend at the time said Megan once told him she was pregnant but lost the baby. Nobody knows why Megan kept the babies in boxes for so many years. She gave police a reason, but they didn't believe her and never said what it was. Her neighbors were shocked. They said she seemed like a normal woman. She lived in a nice home and even babysat other kids. Nobody knew she was using drugs or hiding such a dark secret. In April 2015, Megan was sentenced to at least 30 years in prison, possibly life. She is in Utah State Prison and will likely stay there forever. What made this even sadder is that Utah had a law since 2001 called the Safe Haven Law. It allows anyone to leave a newborn at a hospital, no questions asked. Megan could have done that. She also could have used birth control, but she didn't. Even though she did something terrible, her family still supports her. In Utah, families often stay loyal no matter what. Her family said they still love her and don't understand how she could do something so awful. Diane Downs. In 1983, Diane Downs shocked the world with what she did to her children. On the night of May 19th, she drove her car to the emergency room in Springfield, Oregon. Inside the car were her 3 kids, 7-year-old Cheryl, 8-year-old Christy, and 3-year-old Danny. All of them had been shot. Cheryl was already dead, and the other 2 were badly hurt. Diane had also been shot in the arm. Diane told police that a man with messy hair had stopped her car and tried to steal it. She said he shot all of them, then ran away. But her story didn't make sense. She seemed too calm for someone who had just lost a child. She had bandaged her own arm but didn't help her bleeding kids. Blood was found outside the car, meaning Cheryl might have been shot outside, not inside like Diane claimed. Also, she drove slowly to the hospital, not fast like someone in a panic. The police started to think Diane was lying. When they checked further, they found out she owned a gun like the one used in the shooting. She had told people before that she kept a .22 caliber handgun, the same kind used in the crime. She claimed she threw it away, but police found bullet casings at her home that matched the shooting. Diane's past was also troubling. She was born in 1955 in Arizona. Her mother was just 17 years old. Diane said her mother didn't care much about her. When she was 15, she met Steve Downs. Her parents didn't approve, so she liked him more. They got married in 1973, but the relationship didn't last. Diane said she had children to feel loved. She had Christy in 1974, Cheryl in 1976, and Danny in 1979. After they divorced in 1981, Diane worked at the post office and dated different men. She also became a surrogate mother for money, getting paid $10,000. Later, Diane fell in love with a married coworker named Robert. He said he didn't want kids and wouldn't leave his wife. Diane may have seen her children as the reason he wouldn't be with her. Police believe this is why she tried to kill them. During the investigation, Diane acted strangely. When asked to reenact the crime, she laughed and joked. Her daughter Christy, though hurt and scared, bravely said, "My mom shot me." Doctors also noticed Christy was frightened whenever Diane came to visit her in the hospital. While waiting for trial, Diane became pregnant again. She said she wanted a baby to make up for losing the others. In 1984, she was found guilty of killing Cheryl and trying to kill Christy and Danny. She was given a life sentence plus 50 years and was told she would never be allowed out on parole. In 1987, Diane escaped from prison but was caught 11 days later. She claimed she was trying to find the real shooter, but no one believed her. She was moved to a high-security prison. Over the years, Diane has continued to say she is innocent, but the evidence and her daughter's words prove otherwise. Her two surviving children, Christy and Danny, were adopted by the prosecutor's family. Christy has had speech problems since the shooting, and Danny is now in a wheelchair. The baby Diane had during her trial was adopted and, after growing up, called Diane a monster. Diane Downs is still in prison today. She keeps saying she didn't do it, but no one believes her. Chris Watts. Chris Watts gained national infamy as the subject of the Netflix documentary American Murder: The Family Next Door. But on August 14, 2018, viewers of Denver 7 News saw him as a concerned husband and father. Watts appeared on the news pleading for the safe return of his pregnant wife, Shanann Watts, and their two young daughters, Bella and Celeste, who had been reported missing. Watts described his concern over Shanann not responding to messages and explained how a friend, Nicole, had called him when she couldn't reach Shanann. Despite his words, many found his lack of visible emotion unsettling. At first glance, it seemed like a standard report about a missing family, but the truth would soon be revealed. The very next day, Chris Watts failed a polygraph test and confessed to killing Shanann. Initially, he claimed that Shanann had killed their daughters in a fit of rage, and that he had killed her in retaliation. However, this story unraveled, and Watts eventually admitted to murdering his entire family. His motive reportedly was his desire to start a new life with his mistress. In a harrowing account, it was revealed that Watts had strangled Shanann at their home and then driven her body, along with his daughters who were still alive at the time, to an oil site. There he smothered his daughters and disposed of their bodies in oil tanks, burying Shanann in a shallow grave nearby. Watts's chilling case shocked the nation not only for the brutal nature of the crimes, but also for his cold demeanor during the news interview. In November 2018, Chris Watts was sentenced to 5 life sentences without the possibility of parole, ensuring that he would never leave prison. The Hart Family. The Hart family looked perfect from the outside. Jennifer and Sarah Hart were a married couple who had adopted 6 children. Their Facebook and Instagram pages were full of happy pictures showing the kids smiling, traveling, and wearing matching clothes. To their followers, they seemed like a loving and joyful family. But in March 2018, the world was shocked when the family's SUV was found at the bottom of a cliff in California. Jennifer was behind the wheel. Her body, along with Sarah's and 3 of their adopted children, Marcus, 19, Jeremiah, 14, and Abigail, 14, were found in or near the vehicle. 3 other children, Devonte, Hannah, and Sierra, were missing. Later, the bodies of 2 more were found. At first, people thought it was a terrible accident, but investigators soon noticed strange details. There were no tire marks to show the SUV tried to stop. The speedometer was stuck at 90 miles per hour. It soon became clear this was no accident. The truth about the Harts slowly came out. Jennifer and Sarah had been hiding years of neglect. The couple had moved often, pulling their children out of school and trying to avoid child protection services. They used social media to create a fake image of happiness, while terrible things were happening behind closed doors. The first signs of trouble showed up as early as 2008. Teachers reported that the children were eating from trash cans and had bruises. The kids said Jennifer hit them with a belt. CPS looked into it, but believed the couple's excuses. School staff stopped reporting abuse out of fear it might make things worse for the children. In 2010, Abigail showed up at school covered in bruises. She said she was beaten for having a penny in her pocket. Jennifer and Sarah said the bruises came from spanking. Sarah was later charged with domestic abuse, but still allowed to keep the children. Despite these signs, CPS didn't stop the couple from adopting more children. Once all 6 were legally adopted, the Harts pulled them out of school for good and moved to Oregon. There, a family friend noticed disturbing behavior. The kids were often hungry and punished harshly for small things, like laughing too loud. In Washington in 2017, things got worse. One night, Hannah ran to the neighbor's house begging for help. She said they were being abused and whipped with belts. Jennifer soon came to take her home. Not long after, another child, Devante, started sneaking over asking for food. He told the neighbors that Jennifer was the one hurting them and that Sarah used to try and stop her but had given up. The neighbors finally called CPS. 2 days later, a worker came to the Hart house, but no one answered the door. It seems the family left that day, choosing to run rather than face investigation again. Just 54 hours later, Jennifer drove the SUV over the cliff. Sarah and some of the kids had taken large doses of Benadryl. A search on Sarah's phone from the day before asked, "Is death by drowning relatively painless?" In the end, 6 children lost their lives after years of trying to get help. CPS had multiple chances to step in but failed each time. Shelly Knotek. Michelle Shelly Knotek was a woman from Raymond, Washington, whose crimes shocked many. She abused and killed several people over many years, including her own family members and friends. She was helped by her third husband, David Knotek, and both were arrested in 2003. Shelly had 3 daughters, Nikki, Sammy, and Tori, with 3 different men. In 1988, she also took in her 13-year-old nephew, Shane Watson, after convincing his grandparents that she would care for him. Instead, she abused him badly, just like she did to her daughters. Shelly was not just emotionally abusive, she caused serious physical harm too. She humiliated her children and Shane and often hurt them in terrible ways. Her husband David joined in on the abuse. In 1988, Shelly invited her friend Kathy Lorino to live with them. Kathy had just lost her job and needed help. Instead, Shelly isolated her, tortured her, and starved her. Kathy lost a lot of weight, was made to eat rotten food, and bleach was used to treat her wounds. In 1994, Kathy died after choking on her vomit. Shelly and David hid the remains. In 1995, Shane took photos of Kathy's injuries and planned to go to the police. But Nikki, scared of her mother, told Shelly about it. Soon after, David shot and killed Shane. His body was also burned and hidden. Shelly told people that Shane had moved to Alaska. In the early 2000s, another man, Ronald Woody Woodworth, moved in with Shelly, David, and their youngest daughter, Tori. Woody was a troubled man with mental health issues. Shelly took advantage of him too. He was abused in the same cruel ways as Kathy and Shane. In 2003, after being forced to jump from a roof, Woody was seriously hurt. Instead of helping him, Shelly used bleach for his wounds and dipped his feet in boiling water. He died after weeks of pain. Shelly hid his body in a freezer until David came home and buried it. Back in 2002, Shelly had also become a caretaker for her elderly neighbor, James Mac McClintock. He left Shelly his house and money in his will. When Mac died after a fall, Shelly claimed it was an accident. Some believed she may have caused it, but nothing was proven. After Mac's death, Woody was moved into Mac's house. That's where he died. Shelly's youngest daughter, Tori, was 14 when Woody died. She told her older sisters, and they finally decided to go to the police. Shelly and David were arrested in August 2003. Even before that, many people had tried to report Shelly to the police. Kathy's mother, Kate Thomas, didn't believe Shelly's lies and reported Kathy missing. Her sons even hired a private investigator. Shelly's stepmother also gave witness statements to the police in 2001, saying Shelly had killed someone, but the police didn't act. In the end, Shelly and David were finally charged. David was released from prison in 2018. Shelly was sentenced and listed for release in 2022, though many believe she should never be free. Some articles try to paint David as a victim too, but he helped her and stayed silent for years. Timothy Jones Jr. Timothy Jones Jr., a father of 5, whose anger and need for control destroyed many lives. Timothy's life was filled with pain and trauma from the very start. His grandmother Roberta had a horrible childhood and had Timothy's father, Timothy Sr., when she was just 12. Roberta was forced to marry her abuser and later became an alcoholic. This caused more problems at home, and she took out her pain on others. Timothy Jr.'s mother, Cynthia, also had a rough life. She met Timothy Sr. at 16, got pregnant, and both dropped out of school. Their son, Timothy Jr., was born while they lived with Roberta, who didn't like Cynthia. Cynthia used harsh ways to deal with baby Timothy. She left him alone to cry and sometimes bathed him in cold water. She was violent and later diagnosed with schizophrenia. Timothy Sr. got full custody after Cynthia was sent to a mental hospital. He raised Timothy Jr. with Roberta's help, but their home was filled with violence, fighting, and substance abuse. Timothy Jr. was a smart boy who liked taking apart computers, but at 15 he was in a serious car accident that caused a brain injury. He changed after that. He got into trouble, used drugs, and went to jail for stealing. After prison, he tried to turn his life around. He quit drinking, joined a church, went to college for computer engineering, and got a job. He then met Amber, and they married quickly. They had 5 kids, and Timothy got a good job in South Carolina. But soon, things got worse again. He used his religion to control Amber, telling her she couldn't work, wear makeup, or cut her hair. He became more violent and controlling, even hurting her in front of the kids. Neighbors and Amber reported Timothy to Child Protection Services many times. The house was dirty, the kids were unwashed and bruised, but the system failed to protect them. Timothy isolated Amber, and after a rough period, they divorced. He got full custody of all 5 kids. Back in South Carolina, Timothy's behavior became even worse. He stopped caring for the kids, became abusive, and hardly fed them. He would punish them with intense exercises, beat them, and isolate them. Teachers and babysitters saw the bruises and called for help, but nothing serious was ever done. Then, the unthinkable happened. Timothy's 6-year-old son said he wanted to live with his mom. That was Timothy's breaking point. He made the boy do hard exercises for hours. When the boy collapsed, Timothy beat him with a belt. Eventually, the little boy died, and then in a sudden and horrific burst of panic, Jones strangled the remaining 4 children. He admitted to using his hands to strangle his 7-year-old son Elias and 8-year-old daughter Mara, and a belt to strangle Gabriel and Abigail, because he couldn't do it as his hands were too big for their small necks. These were 5 innocent kids who trusted their father. Marie No. Marie No was a mother from Philadelphia who became known for a very sad and shocking reason. Between 1949 and 1968, she had 10 children. 8 of them died mysteriously when they were still babies. At the time, doctors said the babies had died from sudden infant death syndrome, a condition where a baby dies suddenly without a clear reason. 2 of the babies were said to have died from natural causes. For many years, people believed Marie was just unlucky. But in 1998, a writer named Stephen Fried started looking into the case again. He wrote a long article for Philadelphia Magazine, asking questions about how all of Marie's babies could have died the same way. The article got a lot of attention, and soon the police reopened the case. After being questioned by police, Marie No, who was 71 years old at the time, confessed. She admitted that she had killed 8 of her babies by smothering them. She said she didn't know why she did it, and that something just came over her. She was charged with 8 counts of murder, but instead of going to prison, she was given a special deal. Marie was allowed to stay out of jail if she agreed to be studied by doctors and scientists to help them understand why she did what she did. The idea was to learn more about mothers who kill their children, especially those who may suffer from mental health issues. Sadly, that study never happened. Marie continued to live in her old house with her husband Arthur and their pets. Arthur loved his wife and never believed she killed their children. He struggled with alcohol, and he died in 2009. Marie lived for several more years. She moved out of her house in 2013 and spent her final days in a nursing home. She died on May 5, 2016, at the age of 87. Her case is remembered as one of the worst cases of a mother killing her own children in history. People who worked on the case, including police and doctors, had waited many years for the truth to come out. Some of them passed away after finally seeing Marie admit to the murders. Although Marie may have had mental and physical health problems, including possible postpartum psychosis after giving birth, nothing can excuse what she did. Her story ends quietly, but the loss of those 8 babies is something that will never be forgotten.